The world of Pokemon, full of all sorts of amazing and wondrous creatures. From the land, to the sea, to the sky, there are hundreds of different species, some known and some still yet to be discovered. Each of the 9 regions that we've been to so far have their own varieties of Pokemon, all uniquely adapted to survive in the various environments across the globe. And as we continue to travel further and further out, we find more new and interesting Pokemon and places awaiting us in the future. And along with each of these new Pokemon come new possibilities, new stories, new friendships, and new adventures. But what about those that we've left behind? Way, way behind. In a time before regions even had names. In a time before the first stories were ever written. What about the Pokemon from an ancient era? Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be working on designing starter Pokemon from a time many, many years in the past. Before the regions as we know them today, and even before the regions from Legend Arceus. During a time when rocks like these were still made of flesh and blood. Today we'll be starting with this region's grass starter. Here we go. Pokemon are typically, with a few exceptions, creatures based on a combination of animal and element. And for a Pokemon that's come from a time millions of years ago, we want to use an animal from that same time period. There are plenty of examples already of Pokemon from the Dino days. Ones based on T-Rex or Archaeopteryx, for example. So for our grass starter, I've decided to use the carnivorous Dilophosaurus as a creature base to build upon. We start first with the Stage 1 form, a tiny, cute, level 5 critter who's ready to go out with you into the world on the biggest adventure of his life. An enduring partner who'd hang with you through thick and thin. He's covered in pointy little thorns from head to tail, has vine wrappings around some of his limbs, and has pointy little leaf ears. Next, we'll move on to the big guy, the 3rd stage evolution. For this design, I wanted to capture the same sort of feel as the Gen 1 and 3 starters. I didn't want the design overall to deviate too heavily from the feel of what you start out with, because I want you to be able to sort of know what you're going to get with these guys. They're not going to do a wild 180 on you and end up entirely different to how you'd hoped they would. I'm looking at you, Inteleon. Instead of changing up entirely on you, the features simply exaggerate as they evolve. The thorns on the final Evo have grown out into full-size pointed spikes. The vine wrappings around the arms and tail have become thick and thorny as well. More leaves have sprouted out of various places on his body, and despite the real-life Dilophosaurus not actually having this, I wanted to pay a little bit of an homage to Jurassic Park's version of a Dillo. So those signature little ears have now become a big fancy leaf frill, able to fan out and flare up whenever this Pokemon is experiencing heightened emotion, or as a threat display. With all my ideas sketched out and ready, I set to work on lining this big guy as best I could. So while you watch that, here's some little fun facts about what happened while I was going through the process. Initially, I wasn't going to make a 2nd stage evolution for this guy. I was only originally planning on drawing the 1st and last stages as a way to save me a bit of time and work. But the further along I got with him, the more I kept thinking about that 2nd stage, and so I did it. I added one in, and while he isn't in this time-lapse, you will get to see him in just a bit. Another fun fact is that though this time-lapse is sped up, from sketching to lining, this entire process took me around 2.5 hours, with no shortage of breaks in between. As much as I love the idea for this guy and wanted to get him done, it's actually really difficult for me to sit in one place and focus on one thing for too long. I kept having to get up, walk around, get a snack, come back, work a bit more, get up again, go check my animals, come back, work a bit more. Every time I could feel my attention beginning to slip, I'd either brute force it and do my best to push through, or stop and take a small break, which is really, really hard when the tantalizing thought of playing Minecraft with your friends is only a few clicks away. Still, I'm actually very happy with how this guy turned out in the end. From his initial concept to the final colored version, which you'll see in just a bit. There certainly are things I think I could have done better, but for a first go, I think he's pretty alright. And now for the final reveal. Once this little lad has been fully colored and polished, what does a grass starter from ancient times really look like? Well, here he is. Now we're going to take this one step at a time and go over each of this Pokemon's individual stages, because I think that each of them does have their own sense of charm, and getting to know them a bit better might help to make them feel a little more lively. First up is Sproutike, the hatchling Pokemon. This pure grass type begins its life no larger than the size of your average small dog, but what it lacks in size it definitely makes up for in personality. It's feisty and rambunctious, and can often be seen mimicking the fighting styles and moves of its older packmates as a way to play and practice honing its skills. If you ever own one of these little fellas, be prepared to wrestle. They're just like playful kittens, with plenty of energy to boot. But for all their posturing and wily antics, Sproutike is still just a very little Pokemon, and if it is ever actually faced with a genuine threat, it'll be quick to hide behind the safety and protection of its packmates, or its trainer. The day your Sproutike faces a challenge head-on, keep an eye on it. It may just be close to evolving. Second, we have Pherapod, the Whiptail Pokemon. If you thought Sproutike's antics were bad, watch out. This theropod Pokemon has all the same playful and boisterous nature as its previous evolution, but with more than 3 times the power. Pherapod's vigorous training has strengthened its muscles, and in fact its tail is so strong that it regularly snaps trees in half during its training sessions. It's grown a thick mane of leaves down the back of its nape, and a tiny flower has begun to bud on its left arm. It isn't uncommon to see small groups of Pherapod all gathered and training together, regularly testing its growing strength against rivals in fierce duels. And last is Diloflora, the dueling Pokemon, a dual grass and fighting type. Its thorns have grown out fully, the flower on its arm has finally blossomed into a beautiful shield, and that, coupled with the vines on its arms and tail, are now all tough enough to absorb even the strongest of blows. Unlike its 2 previous evolutions, Diloflora is quiet, reserved, and honorable. It has calmed down considerably as it's grown, and now no longer challenges every random passerby that it meets, instead seeking out only those of equal or greater strength who are up to the challenge. Annually, Diloflora will migrate from across the region and gather together to form one large temporary pack in order to challenge each other in fighting competitions to see who comes out on top. They fight with their strong whip-like tails and use their flower shield to stave off enemy attacks. Many of the younger Sproutike and Pherapod will gather around to watch the competition, and will cheer for and encourage their favorite competitors, making the whole event a very lively affair. A Diloflora trainer would be remiss to not attend. And there you have it, a grass starter for an ancient era. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like, and if you want to see more like this, stay tuned in by subscribing. I'm going to be working on the fire and water starters next, so you may see those pop up in the near future. If you have any guesses for what the fire starter might be based on, leave a comment down below. Who knows? You may just end up being right.